Thanks for coming, Jesse. I've been so excited to talk to you. You're a pretty accomplished ultra runner yourself, and you do a lot of coaching. So I'm excited to get into a lot of different things with you today. I kind of want to start though with your Bear 100 race that you just barely did this last fall in 2023.
Yeah.
You took third, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about how that went.
It was good. Yeah, I've always wanted to do the Bear. It's kind of a well-known Utah race, and I knew it'd be a pretty tough year, and I knew the odds of winning were going to be pretty low considering the guy who won. Zach beat the course record, and he was very fast. And, you know, I have a lot going on in my life. I was happy to race just once this last year. So it was kind of my main focus. And yeah, it was a beautiful day. Weather was perfect. Pretty much everything went well. You know, it's hard to compare results as a position because it may have been one of my best races, even though I didn't win. Yeah, it was pretty competitive, and overall I did something that is pretty rare for me, where I actually started to pass people during the race. I was smart enough to hold back. As the race went on, I actually was able to pass people. I knew that going into it, there was some really fast people that would be in the front early on. So I just kind of held back and was in sixth place for a bit of the beginning. And just by holding the same pace, you know, three people just kind of fell off. Yeah. And I was able to gain third place and then just kind of hold from there. And it was fun because it was a very tight finish between second and fourth.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, that's so fun.
I believe it was about 3 minutes. Second beat me, and then fourth was about 3 minutes behind me.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So for 100-miler to finish with a pretty hard, almost felt like a sprint. Yeah. You know,
someone's 3
guess
minutes behind you. That's like, that could be like as little as a half mile or something. Which
I
is nuts.
I had about 2 miles to go, and we saw his light approaching.
Oh
so he was already kind of going faster. So I had to really.
Were you gassed at that point, or were you fired up to
but it's really amazing how well the mind can trigger the body to just push, because I felt like I didn't have much left, but when that headlamp came behind me, it was like go time. You know, I had so little distance left that my pacer was just like, go, man, I'll try to distract him with my headlamp, and maybe he'll think it's you, but
that's
just
a
go.
Good little strategy there.
Yeah And I mean, it's not fast, but it was probably like under 7 minute pace for the last 2 miles of just like trying to get there. And I had seen second place at about mile 60, I believe. So I knew he was close to me. But I just couldn't quite catch up to him. And my major goal of the race was to podium. So I was really happy with it.
And you finished in 19. What was your finishing time?
It's like 19:13.
That's a great time for the Bear, though.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I was really, I think the best day I could have had would have been like right under 19. But you know, first was like 17 and a half hours. So to be beat that much by that much was like, oh, I cannot believe that. But again, he's a special runner. I think he's going to be a top American here coming up in the next few years. So it was humbling, but at the same time, the amount he trains and the time he can put into training, he's I think going to be one of the best in the U.S. So it's
also
okay.
Fun to race with him too.
It is,
to like
just to see what he does and how he does things. And it was his first 100, and I actually interviewed him after, and you know, his nutrition was dialed. Everything was really well executed for someone who's young, and his first 100 it went really well for him. So that was fun to witness.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as someone who, like, you studied nutrition, you have a master's in nutrition, right? And you do a lot of nutrition coaching. What was your nutrition plan like for the Bear? And how did you like decide to program it for yourself?
Yeah, good question. So I always am trying to experiment with new things. I feel like as a nutritionist guiding runners, it's important I understand all the products out there, different race strategies. So I did kind of a mix of gels, powder, and just small amounts of whole foods, and doing some bars. Interestingly enough, Zach kind of stuck to just gels and powder, just one product, Morton.
Yeah, that's
just
crazy.
did Morton, you know.
That's gnarly for a 100.
It is.
That is
it
so
is.
gnarly.
And you know, it's super efficient and fast, but I typically wouldn't recommend it, but some people can get away with it. You know, for me, I've noticed like having some bars and some whole foods and a variety helps me. People tend to get very sick of the same flavor, you know, flavor fatigue. So I try to prevent that with kind of an array of different products. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward. I tried to maintain, you know, 60 to 70 grams of carbohydrates every hour. And overall, the nutrition went well. I'd say that was probably the best my stomach has held up for the whole day. So again, yeah, third, but honestly, one of my better performances. And the nutrition piece was definitely something that helped a lot. I tend to struggle in 100s for the last couple hours getting anything down.
Does it like you struggle keeping things down or even just like taking foods?
Yeah, not even keeping things down. Luckily, I'm not one to like throw up much or anything, but your stomach is just so sick of eating that it takes so much willpower and brain power to be able to just continue to eat. So not getting sick of those foods, I've noticed, really helps. You know, keeping a diversity of foods allows you to not get so sick of something that you just can't eat it. I mean, even just imagining your favorite food and imagine having to eat your favorite food every 30 minutes for 20 plus hours, even if it's your favorite food,
that's
right?
Gnarly.
You're never going to want to eat that food again after that. So it doesn't really matter how tasty the product is. You're just going to get sick of it after a while. So it's a real struggle for people in ultras, especially 100s, to not experience that flavor fatigue. Yeah.
So have there been other races that you've done like just Martin gels or just like liquid calories that you haven't liked, or you just kind of know your body enough to be like, that wouldn't work for me?
Yeah, honestly, I've never done it where I just use one product. I've stuck to just two, and that seemed to be okay, but I still need some diversity. I still need some fruit. I still need some whole foods. Again, that can work for some people. And that's why nutrition is such a key element to these things, because you can't just go off of what other people are doing. You have to figure out on your own and with the help of somebody to like just know how to do it properly and to sustain yourself for that long. You know, some people joke that 100s are kind of like an eating contest too. Like the person that can continue to eat, obviously they're getting energy. They're able to put more energy out. Those people will have a huge advantage. So.
Yeah. And I really appreciate your page on Instagram too, because I feel like right now a lot of creators are like, this is the best way to eat. This is what you should eat during an ultra, where I feel like your page gives a little bit more nuance and also like speaks to like, this is why this works for some people. This is why it might not work for you. And I like really appreciate that type of like transparency in like a social media page. You like don't see that a lot. So that's something cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a tricky space to be in. I think that selling nutrition a lot of the times, having a strategy or this is the way that will work is an easier selling point. But I just don't think it's realistic. You know, everybody's different, and I think there are a lot of nuances and gray area in nutrition. It's not as black and white as we may think. So I appreciate that, and I do want to hopefully be an influence in seeing both sides of the story and trying to like not just take one side and say that this is the way, this is the formula, because I don't think there ever will be a one formula for everybody, you know. So
And in the ultra world especially, I think we see a ton of athletes thriving off of wildly different nutrition programs and diets. And so it is just like, it's cool to hear like the science behind it and why different things work for different people.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I'm sure you see that in personal training, right? Like certain people respond differently to different types of lifting and different weights and different diets. I mean, it's not super easy to figure out, but if you're flexible and understanding that there isn't this one size fits all, you'll probably get better results with your athletes.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Like even something as simple as rest days. Like I used to kind of think one rest day a week would be standard for most people, but I have clients who take 3 rest days a week and they grow quicker taking 3 rest days a week. Huh. So it's just like, it's very variable in every aspect of fitness, I think. And it's cool to speak to that variability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You said something that was kind of interesting about the bear, though, how you, for the first time, you were passing people toward the end of the race. Was there anything you felt like you did in training that helped you prepare for that type of energy at the last half of the bear? Or was it just more of a mental game that you're like, slow down, speed up?
Yeah, very good question. I would say it's mostly a game of patience that has taken me years to develop. It's really hard with hundreds not to want to just get out in the front and feel comfortable there and say, okay, I've done my job. I'm in the front. Now I just have to stay here. But for a lot of people, that strategy is not great, and it can cause you to burn out really quickly and end up in a position much worse than you anticipated. It is a very personality based thing as well. Some people do really well just being the first person out there and holding on, and that actually has worked for me in some races. But when I know that there's people that are better than me out there, the patience game can get you in a position better than you not being patient, right? So talent isn't always going to get you a win or a podium in ultras. A lot of the time it's patience and wisdom of like, I want to wait to see what these guys are going to do. I want to see how strong they are first. I'm going to test out the field before I make moves. Really analyzing the field and knowing where you stand goes a long way. The ego is very powerful, and adrenaline has a huge influence on these races.
Yeah.
So to not just, burn a lot of gas at the beginning and try to get out in front takes a lot of discipline. And I'm working on that. And if it's a race that I pretty much know I'm not going to win, that strategy seems to work better for me. If it is a race I am trying to win, I sometimes take that risk to just go out in front, and then sometimes I do better being chased. I do better knowing that I have to keep a certain pace and a certain distance. I have to be quick with aid stations because someone's behind me. So it is just strategy. And if you analyze a lot of the pros in ultra running, there are some that can be in 20th place and end up third. They're consistently trying this strategy. However, a lot of times those people don't necessarily win. They get in a great position, but they don't necessarily win. So is that strategy effective to win races? I'm not sure. Can it get you a podium? Probably. But I think physiologically too, it just makes sense to warm up for the first few miles and not just kind of shock your body and just like go hard at the beginning, So it's a little bit of both psychological and physical.
Yeah. Like with a 20-hour race, 19-hour race, like there's so much time for something to happen to the other players in the game. And you kind of get to know the people that you're racing with too. Like I know that on a lot of my races, I noticed that like I am pretty strong on uphills, but on a technical downhill, everyone will beat me any day. So it's just like kind of playing to your own strengths too, I feel like, and learning what portion of the race you need to push and what portion of the race you might need to hold back a little bit.
Yeah. And sometimes that just takes racing. Like there's no amount of training that can teach you that. And that's why with the people I coach, I really encourage like trying to race pretty often. I mean, don't burn yourself out, but 3 or 4 races a year to just practice your strategy, see how you are compared to other people. You just can't get that with training. You kind of have to race to know what your strengths are. Yeah.
What do you feel like your strengths are? Or at least in the bear, where did you kind of play to your strengths and play to your weaknesses?
Good question. I'm pretty consistent.
Like pacing or
in the pacing. Yeah.
Okay.
So my family often comes out and cruise, and I'm pretty close in predicting when I'm going to be somewhere and when I'm going to finish and stuff. It's nice for them, for sure.
It's nice for your cruise.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'm pretty consistent in my pacing and pretty realistic. I'm not super fast. 100 miles are probably my strongest distance just because I've got good stamina and endurance. And it's probably because I need to practice what I preach more and do more workouts and speed work. I think I could be better at shorter distances, but because I don't have a track and field background or cross country, I just didn't develop that in my youth. So speed is a little tricky for me. I have developed pretty good uphill ability. Downhill is still a work in progress. And I'm kind of like you where, I can pass people on the uphill, but if it's a super fast descent, I might lose a position or two. So those are the things I'm kind of working on. And, you got to question whether you're willing to expose your weaknesses and work on your weaknesses or just kind of stick with your strengths. So like I said, this last year, I just decided on a 100-mile race, but I do have interest in getting better at trail marathons and, flatter courses and just like working on just raw speed. Because I think that is a super interesting part of running too. Like I'm fascinated with ultra running, but I'm also fascinated with a mile,
Oh yeah.
Because there's just, it's a person in a track and there's really not a lot of variables. It's just someone running really fast, as fast as they can. And the mile is a very interesting distance because it's kind of right at that limit of aerobic ability. I'm going on a tangent there, but I do want to continue to address some weaknesses. But I'm 34. I'm naturally going to be losing speed, so it makes sense to just get more speed work under my belt anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite speed workouts that you do pretty frequently, or do you kind of bounce from like speed intervals, endurance intervals, VO2 intervals type of thing?
My favorite workout is probably 40 to 60 minute uphill, kind of all out. Those are fun. I don't know if fun's the right word, but it show like I get a lot of good stimulus from that training stimulus. An easy entry point that I start with a lot of people are just like 60 or 30 second strides where they just push for a little bit. It's such an easy way to get some speed without getting injured. So that's what I'll typically do to start the season. I'll do these 30 second on, 30 second off intervals and then build that up to 60 minutes at a time. And then I start to get into these more tempo workouts where I'll just kind of all out push for 30 to 60 minutes kind of thing. And I see great results there. And as much as I don't enjoy it, track workouts also have a place, I think. 400 meter repeats, mile repeats, even 2 mile repeats. Again, as much as I dislike those, I see that those are very effective as workouts too.
And those like 60-minute, like almost tempo runs are fun too, because it almost feels like you can empty the tank, if that makes sense. And that feeling to me is like one of my favorite feelings after a workout is just like being empty. Yeah. It's very fun.
It is. It is. It feels really exhausting, but it feels very good too, to push that hard. And, I mean, workouts aren't just for the physiological. It's also for confidence and knowing that you can push. Workouts, you just have to suck it up sometimes and do them because there's huge benefits. Yeah.
Mileage, like weekly volume. Do you train by hours, like by time, or do you train by like mileage? How did you work that out for the bear?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I usually go off of mileage volume, even though I think time is great too. I did my very first 100-mile week this last year, which I was really happy about. I'm not a typical super high volume runner. Again, my time is a bit limited, so I'll have 3 or 4 weeks that I get maybe above 70 miles a week. But that's about it. Unfortunately, I know that, that 80 to 100 mile range is where a lot of good stuff happens. But it's a lot of time,
It's a ton of time.
It's a ton of time.
Especially on the trails and when you're training with vert. It's a lot of time.
Yeah, and I typically train people off of volume on time.
Okay.
Because I think if you get too obsessive about the mileage, people tend to go too fast, right? They're like, oh, I've got a 20-mile run. I just want to get this done. I'm going to go. And then they kind of go faster than they should. Where if it's time-based and we have this conversation of like, this is an aerobic run, don't worry about how many miles you go. Just get the time on your feet. Yeah. And they go at an appropriate pace. So when I'm coaching people, I typically go off of time. And for me, I do time as well, but I don't monitor my time as much as I do the mileage at the end of the week.
It's almost like you've got both in mind, but you're kind of trying to hit mileage goals. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Another, like, this is the actual thing I'm most excited to talk to you about is your Millwood 100-mile FKT. Yeah. That is so cool. Thanks. So for anyone that doesn't know, do you want to give like a brief description of what the Millwood is?
Sure. Yeah, it's this little hidden gem that Jared Campbell, who has basically just kind of a local legend, designed. He designed the whirl as well. Put together this absurd 100-mile route that covers Mill Creek Canyon, Big Cottonwood Canyon, and Little Cottonwood Canyon. So it kind of combines them all, hits some summits along the way. It's kind of a mix of scrambling, running, annoying route finding, bushwhacking. You kind of get it all. So it's 36,000 feet of elevation for the 100 miles. It is self-supported. It's not a race. You don't get a buckle at the end. You just do it for you. You can have drop bags. You can do those type of things. You can have a crew. And it's just raw. That's what I like about it. It's not a race setting, and it's all up to you to train and do the recon and make sure you know where you are and time the weather correctly. FKT's fastest known time efforts are really exciting, and I have the bug now since I did this. So yeah, it's not a race, but I wanted to go after the time, and I was able to get the time. I was shooting for under 30 hours and came in at like 29 and a half.
Which is so crazy.
And it was a long time. I don't know if I can handle that much time again. It was a long time. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say this officially, but I think that was the funnest and coolest thing I've done. I think it is. Just because again, you're training for it and you're doing the course. I discovered a lot of the Wasatch that I hadn't before. Like a lot of the course I had never done.
Before you'd actually done it?
Yeah. Dang. Like a lot of it. Like I had lived in Mill Creek for a while, and I was just so comfortable with Mill Creek Canyon that I didn't do little and big much. And I mean, there's so much good running in Little and Big Cottonwood Canyon, and I didn't even know. And the way that he connects everything is so genius and so scenic that I think people should experience it. I never thought I would do it. I had heard about it years ago. One of my athletes during COVID was like, I need 100 to do. Like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, there's this crazy route, Millwood.
Are you insane?
I was kind of joking with him. I'm like, you could do Millwood. He's like, all right, like, let's get ready for it. He ended up making his own route starting from Timpanogos, wasn't able to complete it, unfortunately, but kind of helping him with it and pacing him for part of the section, I kind of got the bug. I'm like, this is stupid for sure, but what if I did it? Like, that could be cool. And so I did. And yeah, it's just so low key, and you end up just coming down Thanes Canyon up Mill Creek, and it's just a few of you. And it was actually very cool because I guess the word got out that I was doing it, and people that had finished Millwood came to the finish. It was like this.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It was like 5 or 6 people that had already done it. And I think I was like 23rd or 25th to ever do it. And there's just this group of guys that had already done it, kind of like cheering me on as I finished. And Jared came out too, the guy who created the route. And I don't know. It's like, races are cool, but these FKTs are amazing too. It's just it's its own experience. It's a very different feel than a race because it's just you.
Yeah.
And it's all up to you to plan. It's all up to you to pick your weather window. It's all up to you to choose your nutrition. You can't rely on aid stations. A lot of it was by myself. I wanted to do the first 50 alone, have crew for the second 50, and it was just all around an amazing experience. So yeah.
The course looks crazy fun.
It is.
Like crazy, but crazy fun.
Yeah. Some of it is you're really like cursing Jared because there's some parts that just aren't trail. You're just bushwhacking. And those are the most time.
36,000 feet of gain, bushwhacking uphill.
Yeah.
Or I guess down scree or something like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Some of it's downhill, not marked trail, super steep. And it's kind of funny because I keep putting in for Hard Rock and I would love to get in, but I feel like and people are going to not like that, probably what I'm saying, but I think Millwood, like it's almost as scenic. I've done part of Hard Rock and like part of the Millwood course, especially like the Little Cottonwood sections are so scenic, and you get just as much vert, and the terrain is really similar to Hard Rock that like I'm almost okay not getting into Hard Rock because I've done the Millwood, and they're similar in a lot of ways. So yeah, special place in my heart for sure.
That's so cool.
I'll probably never do it again, but it has a special place in my heart. Once in a lifetime thing. Yeah, and the timing worked out. You know, I was still living in Mill Creek. The accessibility was great to do the recon and everything. And so, yeah.
So when did you decide to start the course?
What day did I do it?
Like, did you start at 5 a.m.? Did you start at night?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I started at 9 a.m.
Okay.
Which, looking back on it, I probably would have done the Mill Creek section at night.
Because you know it so well?
I knew it so well, and it's the more runnable section.
Okay.
It's the easier trail to follow. It's way less likely you're way less likely to get lost. Whereas the little and big section, doing those at night, it's not only like pretty cold. I did it October 1st. Luckily, it was a pretty mild year, but we still got some snow on Baldy. It's overall like smarter, I think, to do that section in the day. So I think starting at night, you're going to have to go a full night anyway. So I think starting at night and getting the Mill Creek section out of the way in the night, and then the Cottonwoods in the day is the way to go. If I had to do it again, I would do that. But I started at 9 a.m., got to kind of sleep in a little bit. And then I finished around like 3 p.m. or something, I think it was. So still plenty of light.
29 hours.
It was wild.
Yeah.
I haven't cried before after racing, but I think because of the time I was out there, I was just so emotionally vulnerable that when I finished and saw my kids and my wife and everybody, I just kind of like started crying, you know. I just kind of embraced it, and that was it. And that was okay, you know. And it was a very emotional and fun experience. And my sister actually was able to pace the last 11 miles with me.
Oh, that's cool.
A lot of my friends helped pace it with me, met some new friends that volunteered to help me, people who had done the course before. So it was just an all-around amazing experience. What
were the most difficult parts of the course? Like, where were you route finding, or where were you cursing Jared?
Yeah. So there's this section it's called Birch Hollow, over to Mount Air. So
okay.
it's this section where technically there is trail, but no one ever uses it, and it's very tall shrub. And I had to recon that section like 3 times to not get lost. So really hard, really slow section. You're gonna get scratched up. I probably would have worn like pants or something. And then there's this section by Kessler Peak that we had to do at night that is so absurdly steep and off trail. I didn't think I would make it at that point because we were going so slow. I think I had a 40-minute mile, and that was like downhill.
Oh, dang.
Which is crazy because it was
that's crazy.
so bushwhacky, and we'd go downhill, and then there'd be like a flat section with just like crazy high trees to try to get around. And just like, why did he choose? Like, this isn't a trail. This isn't.
Like, I thought I was running this.
Yeah, and it was the one section I didn't recon. And the guy that was pacing me had done Millwood already. So I was just kind of going with the flow and letting him guide me. And I was like, if I had recon this, I may never have done this because this is horrendous. It was horrendous. Yeah, it is. Because that was like 5 miles of just misery. I mean, I just, it was a terrible section. Like that part is just, there's nothing else to say other than it's horrendous. And like, obviously, if the whole course was like that, I wouldn't have done it. But it's tolerable. He kind of like, I think he wanted to throw in a kind of Barkley vibe to it.
It had a little scratched up.
Oh yeah, it definitely had a. I've never done Barkley, obviously, but it had that kind of vibe of
Where's
like,
the book?
yeah, you're looking, you don't know where you are, you're navigating, you're getting scratched up. There's not a lot of trail around. So yeah, it's like a mix of the Whirl, Barkley, and like a Wasatch 100 kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's intense.
It was intense.
What were some of your highs? Like, what were the best parts of that course? Or was it reflecting on the course that was the best part?
Yeah, no, during the course was really cool. I'd probably say getting up to, I believe it was Regulator Pass, that I believe it's Mineral Fork that you go up, and then you go down into Lake Blanche.
Oh,
so you go into this really cool section where you cross over this ridge, and I like every time I've been over there, there's a couple mountain goat. So you see mountain goat, and that's kind of near when sunrise was happening.
Oh,
and
cool.
So I'm coming down into Blanche, and the colors are still popping off in October, being October 1st. That I would probably say was like the highlight and like the best spot to be in of that course. It's hard to say. It's hard to choose. Like Baldy and Wolverine, those are all cool peaks too in the day. But like, unfortunately, I saw all that at night. But I'd say that was probably the highlight. And then after that, you're kind of at like, I want to say you're 80 plus miles in. And so you've just got one downhill, one more climb, and one more downhill. So you're going into Lake Blanche, and you're kind of like,
euphoria is setting in.
Yeah, this is like the last push. Like I'm 80 plus miles into this. Now I just got to hold on. I'm in a beautiful place. I had a great guy with me, Matt Johnson, and it was just a good time. And he was a great photographer. He got some great pictures of the whole outing. So
that's great.
That was good to like have memories of that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How did you feel your motivation was different from like a regular 100-mile race because it was self-supported? I could imagine that like because your family and like a lot of close friends were there pacing you, it might have been more motivating in some aspects, but also less motivating because there's not as many people.
Yeah.
What did you experience?
It was definitely the most draining because you're all on yourself, you know, and as much as I thought that was cool to do the first 50 alone, it started getting pretty lonely. And quite frankly, I was a little bit scared in the middle of the night. I just blasted music on my phone because I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the wilderness. And some points were kind of scary. So I just blasted music to make sure I was safe of, you know, moose or whatever that could be out there.
Yeah.
So you definitely feel a little more lonely. You definitely feel a little scared in the middle of the night. So it's much more internal and self-reliant than a race. So in that sense, it's like a little more emotionally and mentally taxing than a race would be.
Yeah.
Those little like aid stations just like give you so much boost of morale to see people.
Yeah.
And they kind of cheer you on no matter how small that is.
Too, kind of. It's like, okay, I'll make it to mile 8.7 or whatever.
Now I just have to make it to the next one, and I know it's going to be there. Whereas when you're relying on yourself, you don't have those little boosts.
Yeah.
So in that sense, emotionally, it was definitely more draining than a race would be. But that's also kind of why I liked it, because it was 100% like self-reliant there at the beginning. So yeah, those were the main differences.
It sounds it sounds amazing.
Yeah,
I would love to.
I would highly
the
recommend it.
Yeah,
and I want to see that number from like, I think it's like high 20s now. I want to see that number grow here for sure, because it's just so cool.
Bring awareness.
Yeah. But don't
awesome.
take the record just yet. Let me have it for a little longer.
Like, let me keep it for a few more years.
Yeah.
When did you take that? Like 2022?
Oh man, good question. Let's see. Was that? Yeah, 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I looked on your website before. You won, I don't know if it was like DC Peaks 50 or Squaw Peak 50 that year, but didn't you win that race that year?
Yeah, Squaw Peak 50. Okay.
And was that in preparation for Millwood, or was that just like a fun thing that you hopped in? Yeah,
it was a mix of both. I don't know. There's something really fun about just doing the local races.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's all this drama going around about like UTMB and corporate trail running growing and stuff. And there's something cool just about being grassroots. Like, I know that my money's going to the same guy every time. He's the race director. He's got like volunteers, probably maybe some people are getting paid. I know he's not getting, and you know, people should get paid for races. It's a lot of work. But it's just being grassroots and actually meeting the race director, and he gives you the trophy. And, you know, a lot of locals come out to the park when you come and finish. Like, I've done bigger races and I've done these grassroots races, and I don't know, I still think I like the local ones better. The local feel and just the small, it's just a more intimate setting. Yeah. So Squaw Peak I've done 3 times, and I just really like that one because it's still pretty close. I can just get out of my bed and get to the start. And it's a hard course, and it's hot. It's in June. Oh, yeah. So heat is one of my biggest weaknesses, so it always helps me like kind of address that weakness. I feel like heat in June is one of the most difficult times though to race, because you haven't had time to like acclimatize to the heat at all. You haven't done any real heat runs yet. That's a very good point. So like June for sure are my toughest races, I feel like, especially in the mountains with hydration and stuff. So with hydration, maybe we can kind of move into nutrition a little bit more. Do you have a strategy that you use on your runs? Do you change it for like the distances you do, or how do you strategize hydration for yourself? Yeah, great question. We're more and more seeing that the more water, the better. But you also need to mix that water with electrolytes. So most people are just getting chronically behind on fluids. So I'm getting better at making a point of staying on top of my fluids, making sure I'm getting enough. And then on the electrolytes too. Electrolytes are pretty hard to personalize because everybody has a different what we call sweat rate and sodium concentration. So if you're someone who sweats a lot, you still might not be losing a lot of sodium. A good way of looking at that is if you're someone who has salt stains on your hat or your shirt, some people get that, other people don't. So some people have a different sodium concentration than others. So there's luckily tests you can do now to see how many electrolytes you lose per hour to know how to replace those electrolytes. So I highly recommend doing sodium concentration test. Sweat rate is a lot easier. Basically, you just weigh yourself naked before you run and then after and see how much weight you lost. And then you know how much fluid you're losing. So that's a lot easier. But Yeah, staying on top, and just like food, like we talked about before, your brain also has a hard time continuing to drink fluids.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, just being able to monitor what you have in your pack sounds really easy, but it's not. Like, okay, I need to finish these 2 bottles in the next hour and a half, 2 hours. That seems like an easy task, but like it's super hard in ultras to be like, okay, wait, your brain's everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, where am I at with my water? Oh, I better just rush through this next aid station. I'm not going to fill up. Oh, wow. Now I'm out of water. Yeah. Now I've got a long way to go. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes trying to be fast and efficient is very ineffective at getting you to the finish. Like, happy, healthy, and fast.
Yeah.
So that's just the number one thing for me that I've been working on is like, don't try to skimp. Like, I don't know, growing up, for some reason, my brother was just hardcore about like, don't drink water, don't drink food, go as long as you can without it. And I'm still working at not thinking that that's like, okay, like I used to think that's you got to be tough, you know, avoid a lot of water because you're kind of weak if you need a lot of water. It's so dumb. The thinking is so dumb.
And you would never like prescribe that to a client.
No.
You would never tell a client to
Nope.
do that. But for some reason, your head is like, you got to be tough.
Yeah, got to be tough. Like you don't need to stop at this aid station and get water. Just go in and out. You're going to waste time. Don't be a baby. You've got enough water, whatever. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that's bit me in the butt. So like just seeing where you're at, getting enough fluids, getting enough electrolytes. As annoying as electrolytes are, I hope that we see some products that might be more efficient than powders. Powders are just annoying to get out of bags and
so
get that, you know, in your bottle. And I've found some ways to get around that, but it's still just not super efficient. Maybe like a super high concentration liquid, which you could also formulate yourself. But electrolytes are still kind of a pain. So understandably, people miss that too. They're like, I don't have time in this aid station to get out my electrolyte and get it in my bottle. So I'm just going to skip it for now. So people skipping these things and just trying to be more efficient is one of the biggest problems I see.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to be more conscious of that, of like, even though it's not that long to the next aid station, you need to drink more. And I've talked about this before, like in ultras, you can't go off of thirst. It's too late. You need to be ahead of thirst. And so even though my body's not telling me I need more water by thirst, I know because of the calculations I've made, I need to have this much before the next aid station. So planning that out, thinking that in advance takes a lot of work. And then you also have to fight yourself to make that work on race day, if that makes sense. So,
oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's so easy mentally to think like, you know, you need to drink water. It's been a little bit. It's easy to push it off for like another 5 minutes. And then that really quickly turns into another hour and then you're way behind and it's impossible to catch up.
Yep.
So it's like, it's such an annoying game. But it is just up to you to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So staying on top of it is key. For sure.
So with your sweat rate, have you used any products? Like I think like Nix is one of them where you like wear a sweat patch and then I don't know if you send it in or if you test it at home. Have you done any testing on yourself or do you just kind of go based off of how salty your vest is or how salty your hats are?
I seem to have found a good balance for me, but I still want to do the test. What I am waiting for is there's products now that are wearables. So instead of having to do, put a gauze or piece of cotton on your skin and then send it to a lab, there's now products that you just put on your arm and it tells you in real time.
Cool.
So those are slowly being released, and because of the just the efficacy and the ease of using it, I think that's going to be super helpful to recommend to people. And also you can see the difference between a cooler day and a hotter day. You don't have to just rely on one test. You can be like, okay, when it's cooler, I can get away with less. When it's hot, I'm losing significantly more. This is still like an emerging thing, you know, and recommending the amount that you need to replace is still not super clear. Like, we know that you don't want to replace 100% of your sodium. You want to try to replace 100% of your water, but trying to find the right amount to prescribe with the given information is still not a perfect science. So these tests give you a good idea and a good range. They're still not perfect, but it's much better than just guesswork, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like you said before with food, like experimentation is probably a huge thing with hydration as well. Like, you can't just jump into a race and think that, well, one scoop of whatever your electrolyte powder in a bladder is going to cut it. Because for some people, it might not.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Training the nutrition during training is so critical to do that. Yeah. And talking about gray area, you know, we were talking offline, like before the podcast, like, it's a big gray area. Some products, like Morton, for example, they don't promote having a lot of electrolytes. You know, some studies show that too much sodium is actually going to be dehydrating you more. You know, like, we know that if you eat pretzels, you're going to get thirsty, and so you don't want too much sodium either. So it's tricky to find the right balance for every person, but I'm definitely more on the camp of, like, if you lose a lot of sodium, you need to also replace it.
Yeah.
Skimping on the sodium, at least in my experience, has led to more difficulty, but it varies by the person.
Yeah.
I've tried. I've read literature, and I've tried going out with 0 to very low electrolyte use, and it absolutely is a disaster for me. I'm a heavy sweater, and so it doesn't work for me. But I experimented, and I'm glad I did. Yeah. I know that for me, the no sodium doesn't work, and low sodium doesn't work for me, and I'm glad. But that could be okay for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also just a crazy salty sweater. Like, in the summer, my vest, like, when I'm done, is always just like white.
Yep.
And so I've found, like, I've never been able to drink enough pickle juice at aid stations almost. And for some people, they hate it. Like, they think it's gross. But for me, I don't even taste the salt sometimes at the aid stations because I'm just so deficient, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
So definitely there's a lot of variety per person.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think another super unique thing about you is, are you a vegetarian right now? Yeah. I like how you speak to the nuance of that, again, online. I think right now there is kind of like a cult following with, like, someone will identify with their diet or identify with their way of eating. What are some, like, tips or advice that you have for runners or just athletes out there who are vegetarian or vegan? Are there, like, kind of some general markers that they should hit, supplements that they should think about?
Yeah.
Or just what advice do you have?
Very good question. And yeah, I've been vegetarian for over 10 years now, and the supplement that you just need to start off is B12. Vitamin B12 just isn't produced in plants, so it's actually produced in the gut of animals. So you definitely need to supplement vitamin B12. I'm becoming more and more of an advocate of omega-3s. So DHA and EPA typically is what you'll get by eating fish. We've heard so much about the Mediterranean diet. A lot of that is because of the omega-3 fatty acids that come from the fish. If you're vegetarian, the nice thing is you can just kind of take the fish out of the equation and eat the algae that the fish eat to give them that omega-3. So algae supplements, I'm more and more a fan of. Flaxseed and chia seeds have a pretty weak conversion rate to get to EPA and DHA. So you can't really just rely on flax seeds and chia seeds for brain health and neurological health. I do think that in the long term, if you plan to be long term, having some omega-3s, DHA, EPA through algae is super helpful.
Is there a ratio that you're looking for in a supplement of, like, EPA to DHA, or is it just like an algae supplement that you take?
Great question. Yeah. So EPA and DHA, you want higher numbers. The higher the better. So usually you'll see DHA higher, but you want to see both at least over 100. At least over 100. So the one that I have now is 500 milligrams DHA, 300 milligrams EPA. So that's kind of a higher higher amount, and it's not super expensive. And what I encourage people to do with supplements is like you just get on a subscription, and that way, like when the new one comes, you're like, oh, I haven't been taking
slacking.
it every day.
Yeah.
And so it kind of keeps you accountable to be sure to take it every day. Those really are the two main ones. Vitamin D through winter, I don't just recommend to vegetarians and vegans. That's something that I think everyone should do. I've seen so many. I typically like people to do blood work, and they come back and so many people are deficient in vitamin D. And that's kind of been a new craze is vitamin D supplementation. And I think for good reason. It's got so many functions in the body.
Totally.
Other than that, I think a lot of supplements are overblown. Creatine for endurance just isn't super strong yet. For lifting, it is, absolutely. For endurance, not so much. Making sure you're getting enough protein. And I know we hear a lot of people on Instagram and on social media saying that, this whole thing with protein is a joke with vegans and vegetarians. We can get it. Yes, you can. But unless you're planning and being strategic, it can be hard to get enough. Like It is a conversation. It's not just like, yeah, you get enough, whatever. No, you have to be strategic about how you get it. Other than that, you should like fruits and vegetables if you're vegetarian, because that should make up a lot of your diet.
What else you would?
Yeah. And like that's the thing is like people are vegetarian that eat fast food. You can be vegan and very unhealthy. So it's important that you like those whole foods, and vegetarian has made me discover a lot of new foods. I never really cooked or ate squash. I never ate zucchini. Like it forced me to discover more vegetables, which I like a lot about it. And it's a great way of life for me. It doesn't work for everybody. Again, you have to be strategic. I hear a lot of people say it didn't work for them, and my first question is like, well, did you talk to a nutritionist? Did you make sure you're getting all your nutrients? Did you supplement vitamin B12? A lot of people fail and give up after a few months, I think by poorly planning a lot of the time. So I think it is a very healthy diet. We're seeing a lot of elites, especially in ultra running, gravitate towards that way of eating. Big names like Kilian Jornet is vegetarian, Jim Walmsley's vegetarian, Jack Kunzel is vegetarian. So all these kind of bigger names are leaning more towards it. So I would argue that it could be performance benefit if you do it correctly. If you don't do it correctly, I do think you may actually have your performance go down. So that's why it's very important to talk to somebody to make sure you do it right.
Yeah. Another aspect of like vegetarianism or veganism that I think lends itself to the ultra world is that like when you're eating plant proteins, it also comes with like a lot of fiber, but also a lot of carbohydrates too, which like I know a ton of people who are under fueling. And so when you are like vegetarian and you're trying to hit like maybe a protein goal, that comes with a lot of carbs too that you need to be able to run fast too. So that might be another just like side pro to the
it's
thing.
Inherently high carb. If you want to be low carb, and this was my most recent about protein, I talked about this, like it's hard to do if you're low carb. But I mean, I'm a big advocate of if you're in endurance, if you're in endurance sports, high carb, I think probably would benefit you more anyway than the low carb. So yeah, vegan and vegetarian, it's nice you get your protein and carbs kind of in the same place, which is nice.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
As far as like micronutrients go, do you work with clients on hitting certain micronutrient goals, or do you kind of look at blood work and then advise them to supplement when necessary?
Great question. Yeah. So I use an app called Chronometer, and this allows me to see their daily intake of micronutrients.
Cool.
From there, I'm able to assess whether or not they need to work on these certain micronutrients. And then I've kind of just developed a mental library of foods that are higher in certain micronutrients. And we kind of work towards adding in more of those foods. I would definitely say I'm more of a micronutrient-based nutritionist. Macronutrients are important, and I can set that up in their app too. I do set up macronutrients, but people get very obsessed about hitting macros that they forget about the micros.
Yeah.
Like if you don't hit your macros perfectly, but you hit all your micronutrients, to me, that's the most important. Because those are the pieces of your metabolism. Those are your pieces of recovery. Those are your pieces of thinking clearly. Without enough vitamins and minerals, like you're just not going to be feeling as good. So to me, the micronutrient emphasis is paramount in how I help people. It's like we always look at the micronutrients. And then we do tests, because some people, even though they're hitting 100% of their micronutrient, say iron, they still may become anemic. They may be someone who absorbs iron differently and may need a little bit more than the average person. Going back to how personalized nutrition is essential, because just because someone's hitting 100%, it doesn't mean that they're absorbing all of that 100%. So getting a blood test, making sure that we're actually absorbing all the nutrients that we're trying to hit, that's super important. So I do like to see 6 months, a year at the most, every year to do blood work to just see where you're at. And then day to day, we use the app to know where your micronutrients are.
That's very cool. Is there a lab that you recommend to clients to go get their blood work done at?
Yeah, so Ulta Labs online, ULTA, basically you order your test and then you can go to any lab that will draw your blood and they will draw your blood for you.
Oh, cool.
So instead of having to get a doctor's appointment, go through insurance, which sometimes they don't even cover that well, these blood tests, you can go to Ulta Labs and basically just order what you want and then take that to a lab to get your blood drawn. And they're pretty quick on the turnover too. So there's like LabCorps all over. So you basically just go to a lab that will draw your blood with the paper that you have that you've ordered, and then you can get your results pretty quickly that way. It's funny because we kind of live in a sickness first, then figure things out. Like if you were to go to your doctor and ask for blood work, a lot of them probably would be like, what's wrong with you?
I've been refused multiple times.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, because it's insurance, right? And they need a reason for insurance. And so going through a different company where you just get the labs and you don't have to have these awkward conversations and you just get your labs done, get your results, that seems to be easier for a lot of people.
Yeah. What are some of the micronutrients that you see deficient most commonly?
Anemia is pretty common. So that's iron deficiency.
You do work with a lot of runners, which I think that is correlated in some way, right?
Yeah. So the reason why iron can be deficient in runners, anemia can happen in runners, is when you're pounding your feet against the ground, you're actually breaking red blood cells. So you're losing iron that way. Also, because endurance sports are very consuming of oxygen, you do use up a lot of red blood cells that way. And because people get in potential caloric deficits, you can become anemic pretty quickly too. So there's kind of that trifecta of losing iron from running, and so making sure that you're not becoming anemic. And what's so crazy too is anemia is one of the most drastic. People feel horrible when they're anemic. Their performance can really plummet, and so when they get their iron levels back, they feel like a new person.
Yeah.
So that is something that some people, vegetarian and vegan, can have a harder time with, getting their iron needs met. You need to combine iron with vitamin C to improve the absorption if it comes from plants, but not everybody's going to absorb that as efficiently. I have openly talked about the bioavailability, and sometimes it's just not as high in plants as it is animal food. So you need higher amounts of it. So you need higher amounts of iron in plant food than you would in meat. So just making sure, vegan and vegetarian, I guess, that part too, on the micronutrient aspect, you really need to make sure you're getting enough iron, and even a little bit more through plants to make sure you're getting enough. So that's what I see the most. Again, vitamin D is very common.
Yeah.
Those are the two that I see the most. Obviously, just kind of cholesterol here and there, working on that. A lot of people are using running to just overall improve their health. And so we work together on the running and nutrition aspect to just improve their cholesterol, prevent disease, just trying to become more lean, whatever it is. Some people run just for that and they still like the racing component. Other people are competitive and they want to have a competitive edge and improve their diet and their training to just be faster. So it's kind of all over the spectrum there.
So for you, what made you decide to become vegetarian? Was it your education? Was it maybe ethical reasons? Did you grow up that way?
I have 4 siblings and 2 of my brothers were staunch vegans.
Okay.
Yeah. So since they were very young, they were kind of like forcing, factory farming videos down my throat and telling me that I'm, murdering animals by eating them. They were very staunch vegans. So I was never planning on going that direction. Guys, if you are plant-based, vegan or vegetarian, that is not the way to get people to eat that way. People should see that stuff. I actually am very glad that I did see those videos, and I think everybody should just know what's happening. I do think that's important. I'm not going to play it and kind of have you come with me, though. I think that's a little too much, but you should know what's going on in factory farms for sure. But I saw that stuff, and because it was kind of being shoved down my throat, I was very hesitant to go in that direction. I was still young and convinced that I needed meat at that time. It's a great question. I don't really know when the turning point happened, but it started kind of out of ethical. I saw a cow get hit by a car, and then I kind of saw the cow die in front of my eyes, and I was like, I don't want to keep killing cows. I'm contributing to the death of cows, and that was pretty horrific to see. And if I can't see the cow die, maybe I shouldn't be part of it. That didn't last very long when it was just from an ethical standpoint. And then I just got very interested in nutrition and research and books and literature. And it just seemed to me that maybe that's a healthier option. Maybe that would be a healthier choice for me. And then that compounded with me living in South America for a while and having terrible digestive issues by eating meat all the time. So I learned very quickly that meat just wasn't fueling me. And it was more taking away energy. I just felt lethargic after eating. Lethargic might be exaggerating. I didn't feel well after eating meat. My digestive system didn't feel well. I broke out in acne. I had terrible acne when I was eating a lot of greasy meat. And to be honest, the meat that I was eating, I mean, this was Paraguay. It's a third world country. It's not like it was high quality meat, but it was enough to be like, maybe I need to get rid of it. And after coming home from Paraguay, I decided I'd try it, and I cut it out. And so these kind of half attempts throughout my childhood, coming home and being like 21, I'm like, I think I'm really going to revisit this and try. And so I did. My acne cleared up. I had always been like, it's not like I was overweight, but I didn't have any like definition. I wasn't that lean. And then like without having to do much working out or anything, like I just kind of dropped like 15 pounds of just kind of extra that it wasn't needed. I got a little more defined, and it just worked. It just worked for me. Like that's really the story, is like it was partially ethical, and then it was partially like nutrition knowledge. And then it was like, okay, it's also just not working for me as a person, as my own self. Like it's just not sitting well with me anymore. And then of course the environmental and ethical are benefits, but I don't feel I can't, I'm not part of that camp because I'm not vegan. Right. Yeah. Like I don't feel good saying I do it for ethical reasons, because I still eat dairy. And I do think that dairy is kind of one of the worst aspects of the ethical part. So I can't claim I'm ethical because I don't eat meat. You know, I still participate in it. So I don't feel comfortable saying I'm an ethical vegetarian. But yeah, for me, it feels healthier. I feel like it's a sustainable diet for me. That's kind of how it happened. It's kind of a interesting flow of experiences and things that made me really make the decision, but that's where I'm at now. Yeah,
I think it is important to speak to like using the knowledge that you have, not only the knowledge that you have, but also like you need to try different diets and see what feels good for you and for your body, because there is definitely like variability between people and what will feel good and what will work. So yeah, and then of course like working with a nutritionist with whatever you decide, like you have a master's, you have a lot of education in nutrition. So like using someone who does have a lot of education will help you kind of optimize whatever you've chosen to go with, which is really cool.
Yeah, and just on that point, yeah, everybody's different. I know vegetarian, vegan doesn't work for everybody, and I actually have done a lot of reading and extensive research in low carb and keto. If people choose to go that route, I help people in that arena too. Just because that's what I do for my life. And this is something that bothers me in nutrition in general, is so many people preach one side and I don't think they ever look into the other side, which I think is arrogance. As a nutritionist, you can't just preach what works for you and what you've studied. If you're not willing to study vegan, if you've done low carb, that's arrogance, in my opinion. If I'm vegan or vegetarian and I'm not willing to look at low carb, even though ethically or whatever that's a problem, that's arrogance, especially as someone who's doing this as a profession.
Yeah.
If I'm not willing to even learn how it works, that's just pure arrogance. And I see that so much in the nutrition world. People are like, no, you're wrong. People are always fighting. But I'm kind of like, have you ever looked into the other side? Like, I hear you, but I like to have kind of like educated discussions. And unless you've shown me that you've educated yourself on the other side, this is kind of a dead end. And a lot of people online are like that. They like their way and they don't know the other ways, but they still want to say this is the right way. And it just doesn't work. And I think you just kind of lose professionalism if you don't know the other ways, right? Like I've had great discussions with low carb people, and I think they've appreciated that I actually study and look into those.
And you're familiar with
it. Yeah. And I'm willing to help people who are in that arena, and they want to come to me and they're like, listen, this is what works for me. How can I become a better athlete? Like, I understand. I will work with those people. I get that ethical vegans and vegetarians only work with vegans and vegetarians, but I think I should try to help as many people as I can. That's my goal, So.
Yeah. One of the coolest things, someone gave me advice when I started like coaching and stuff, and they said the most important question to ask is not like what works, but why does it work for them? So like there's a lot of things that people will post online like, oh, I lost weight doing this, or I got faster doing this. And sometimes like I see it and immediately I'm like, well, that's total crap. Like I know that doesn't work. But instead of like writing it off immediately, a better question that I try to ask myself is like, okay, well, why does it work for them? What are they doing that makes it work?
Yeah.
And then you can like gain a greater understanding of nutrition, of how your body works, and like what you can apply to your own health and stuff too.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Yeah, that makes sense. Why instead of what?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Jesse.
Yeah, appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
I like our guests to leave with just giving one piece of actionable advice to our listeners, whether that has to do with nutrition or anything in the running community. Do you have any actionable advice for anyone who may be listening?
Oh, man.
We talked about like a million things today, so I guess you could go anywhere with
me on
this.
The spot. Health is, I think, the most valuable thing. It comes before everything. Can you fully love your family? Can you fully be present in your work? Can you fully be happy without taking care of yourself? I don't know. I don't think so. I think putting your health as a priority in your life, we are in January, of course. That's the trend, to take your health seriously, but it's not a selfish act. You should take care of your health. It will make the people around you happier because you're taking care of yourself. You're taking action to become healthier, and that not only benefits you, but the people around you. So please don't take health as something selfish. Please consider it as something that you deserve. Everybody deserves health, and it's one of those things that just takes time and consistency, and it doesn't matter what you like to do, but movement and eating well can change your life dramatically. So just take your health seriously. You deserve good health. Don't neglect it. And I think you're going to be a lot happier in life. That's about it.
Cool. That's perfect. Thank you so much. I admired you before I met you, but after talking to you, I admire you a lot more. So thank you for coming and spending time with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.